Some wounds never bleed, but they never stop aching either. Let us know in the comments section below. What do you think happens when someone tears away more than just a patch? The boy's hand didn't tremble as he reached for the jacket. That was the most disturbing part. Ricky Carter wasn't afraid of much. Not the cops, not his father, not the kind of consequences adults love to warn him about. He had swagger, noise, and a need to prove something he hadn't yet figured out. And today, in the middle of Hale's diner, he spotted his next proving ground sitting 2 booths down, sipping coffee and saying nothing. Larry Adler. To Ricky, he looked like any other tired old man. Hair thin and silver, a jaw still firm even under loose skin, a chest that didn't puff out for anyone's approval. The military jacket he wore wasn't the sharp kind from movies. It was sun-faded, shoulder seams worn thin, and a name stitched in thread that had frayed to near nothingness. But the patch, that patch still gleamed. Red, gold, and black thread, tight and proud. "Betty wears it for attention," Ricky muttered, loud enough for his friends to hear. Loud enough for Larry to hear, too. Tommy gave a half-smile, unsure. Jenna, the only girl in the group, rolled her eyes. She'd seen Ricky do this before. Pick targets, pick fights, pick trouble. But nobody stopped him. Not yet. Ricky stood, letting his boots thump deliberately against the tile floor. He strutted past the counter, past the pie fridge, past Sam Hale, who arched an eyebrow and instinctively tightened her grip on the coffee pot. He paused next to Larry's booth. "Hey, Gramps," Ricky said, his voice soaked in sugar and static. "You in costume or something?" Larry didn't look up. The boy's mouth twitched. He hated being ignored. "I said, nice jacket. Little warm for that. Isn't it?" Still nothing. Then Ricky reached out. 2 fingers, just enough to hook under the edge of the patch on Larry's arm. He tugged. The rip wasn't clean. Thread strained, fabric whined, and the patch gave way with a final tearing sound that cut through the entire diner. The booth went still. The clatter of forks, the hum of the refrigerator, Sam's voice caught in her throat, and the pot she held trembled just slightly. Larry Adler blinked. Slowly he turned his head. Not all the way, just enough to glance at the boy's hand now holding the piece of his past like a dirty napkin. "You got something on your hand," Larry said. It was soft. Flat, but it sliced deeper than a shout. Ricky smirked, but his knuckles tightened. "Yeah, trash," he said, letting the patch fall on the table. He walked away then, half expecting to be stopped, half hoping someone would try. But nobody moved. Not Larry, not Sam, not the other diners, all of whom looked down, away, or into their coffee as if it held absolution. Larry picked up the patch, brushed it off, set it gently on the booth beside him. "Need a refill, Larry?" Sam asked, walking over with quieter footsteps now. "Sure," he said, lifting his cup like it was heavier than it had been before. She poured without a word, her lips pressed in a tight line. She wasn't sure if she should say sorry. It wasn't hers to apologize for. "'Tis these days," she muttered finally. Larry didn't reply. Adler didn't speak for several seconds. "I'll stitch it back," she added. He finally looked up at her, the faintest crease forming at the corner of his eyes. "No need," he said. "It's already stitched in here." He tapped his chest once, just above his heart. Behind them, the diner's door swung open. A gust of sunlight spilled in, followed by boots that walked with discipline, even off duty. Logan Reeves was barely out of the Corps, but carried himself like a man who'd never really left. He scanned the room once, paused, then moved toward the counter. He didn't know Larry personally, but he knew that jacket. More importantly, he knew what that patch meant. You didn't rip it off someone's sleeve. You didn't rip it off their story. He didn't say anything either. Not yet. But he watched. And he listened. Ricky was laughing again now, louder than necessary, trying to reassert his power. I mean, what's he going to do, call for backup from the Battle of Iwo Jima? Logan stood from the counter. Nobody noticed. Not yet. The coffee had gone cold. Larry didn't care. His hands cradled the cup like it was a canteen in a desert, but he wasn't drinking anymore. The patch sat beside it, creased, slightly torn, but not ruined. Not ruined, he reminded himself. Not yet. He could still feel the sudden tension in the threads, the unexpected force on his arm. He'd been disarmed by worse before, by shrapnel, by loss, by the gut punch of watching men you trained die before their first stripe faded. But something about this, about the casualness of it, that cut deeper than anything he remembered in the jungle. Sam kept hovering. She wiped down the counter 3 times in the same spot, pretending not to glance over. The regulars, men with ball caps that said Navy, USAF retired, and VFW 1034, kept their heads down. Not out of cowardice, out of habit. Veterans knew how to read a room, and they knew silence was sometimes the loudest weapon. But the kid didn't get that. Ricky leaned against the jukebox, legs crossed, eyes bright with smug satisfaction. His friends hung nearby, cracking jokes that weren't funny and throwing glances like pebbles at windows, testing for cracks. They didn't laugh with him, not really. They were riding the wave, but not one of them had the courage to lead it. "Yo, what's that even stand for?" Ricky called out suddenly, not looking directly at Larry. "That patch. Looks like something off an old war movie. You even do anything? Or just wear it for attention?" Larry didn't respond. Ricky turned to his friends, grinning. Bet he was a cook or something, making pancakes in the jungle. Tommy gave a faint chuckle, the kind you make when you're not sure if you're allowed to stop laughing yet. The diner's bell jingled. Logan Reeves walked in. This time, people noticed. His presence wasn't loud, but it was certain, like a calm tide that drags you off your feet without warning. He didn't look at Ricky. Didn't need to. He walked past the group, past the booth where Larry sat, and stopped at the counter. Sam was already there, pouring a fresh cup without asking. He nodded once, then he turned. "Sir," he said, his voice level, to Larry. "Mind if I join you?" Larry raised an eyebrow just slightly, then he nodded toward the bench across from him. Logan sat down. Straight spine. Calloused hands. "You served?" Larry asked, not out of doubt, but out of ritual. "Yes, sir, still do. 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines." Larry nodded. "Vietnam. 1st Recon." Pause. Respect doesn't have to be spoken. It hangs in the air like the smell of cordite after a firefight. Logan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a smaller, newer version of the same patch Ricky had ripped off. "You dropped something," he said, placing it gently on the table. Larry didn't ask how he had it, didn't ask where it came from. These were men who understood the power of small gestures. Behind them, the silence was beginning to shift. Ricky was watching. His confidence, still intact, flickered slightly. Logan stood. He didn't raise his voice. "Anyone know what this is?" he asked, loud enough for the room. People looked up. Ricky's friends tensed. "This patch," Logan continued, "is the emblem of the 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. Marines who moved first into places nobody else wanted to go. Men who ran missions without support, without certainty of coming back. Men who watched their brothers bleed and still pushed forward." He paused. "This one," he held up the tattered patch that Ricky had torn, "was earned. Not printed, not bought online, earned." Ricky scoffed, but softer this time. "Relax, dude. It's just a patch." Logan turned toward him, and for the first time, so did everyone else. "You ever had someone rip something off your chest?" he asked. "Not your jacket, your identity?" Ricky opened his mouth, but no words came. "It's not about the cloth," Logan said, turning back to Larry. "It's about the years behind it. The blood. The memory of men who didn't get to come home. You don't tear that without tearing something else with it." Larry finally spoke again. "I wore that patch through monsoons and fire, carried buddies with it on my back, buried friends with it on my chest. And today a boy thought it was a joke." He looked at Ricky now, not angry, just tired. Tired in a way that made everyone else in the room want to stand up straighter. "I didn't say anything," Larry added, "because I've already said enough in my lifetime, and none of it came through shouting." Ricky shifted, suddenly aware of the heat in his ears, the way the room had turned on him. I didn't mean..." Tommy stepped back. Jenna had already turned toward the door. But Ricky stood alone now. "I'll pay for a new one," he said quietly. Larry nodded once. "Not the point," Logan replied. And with that he picked up the original patch, still frayed and trembling, and set it back on the table. No one needed to say anything else. The silence was whole again, and this time it belonged to Larry. Ricky didn't come back to Hale's diner the next day, or the day after that. The booth near the window, Larry's booth, was left alone, though Sam made sure to clean it a little more carefully than usual. The rip in the jacket had been sewn, just enough to hold, but Larry still kept the patch in his breast pocket rather than restitching it to his arm. He said nothing about it. He came in, nodded politely to Sam, sat down, ordered the same coffee, and said little more than "black," as always. But the silence around him had changed. It wasn't avoidance now. It was reverence. Larry had never asked for that. Truth was, he didn't know what to do with it. The story had gotten around town faster than ketchup slides off a plate, the kind of thing that lived longer than the facts. Some versions said Ricky had ripped 2 patches off. One had him shoving Larry outright, which didn't happen, and another ended with Logan putting him in an arm bar in front of the jukebox, which definitely didn't happen. But the truth, the quiet dignity of Larry's restraint, the clarity of Logan's words, and the weight of that moment stuck to people in a way that rumors couldn't touch. A few of the other veterans started coming in more often after that. Dave Brewster, who used to avoid crowds. Mel Torres, Army MP back in A4, hadn't set foot in Hales since he came home from his 3rd tour. Even old Benny Shepard, blind in one eye and bad-tempered about it, came and sat with Larry like it was 1969 again. "You didn't swing," Mel said one afternoon, shaking his head over a cup of decaf. "I don't think I could have helped myself. I'd have gone full staff sergeant on that kid." Larry just shrugged. "Wasn't the moment." "What was it then?" Larry looked out the window, watching a leaf skitter across the parking lot. "Sometimes silence says more than shouting ever could. Sometimes it's not about the boy. It's about the room." Benny snorted. "Still too poetic for a Marine." "Recon," Larry corrected. "That explains it." They all laughed, and it was a full, real kind of laugh. The kind that cleans out old air from the lungs. The room grew quiet again, but this time it was warm. And then the bell rang. Every head turned, just slightly. Ricky stood in the doorway, alone. His hair was different, neater. His hoodie was clean. His hands were empty, tucked into the front pouch like he didn't know what to do with them. Behind the counter, Sam blinked once, unsure if she should grab the coffee pot or something heavier. "I just want to talk," Ricky said quickly, eyes scanning the room like a deer waiting for the crack of a branch. No one moved. Ricky stepped forward, slower than usual, measured, and then he looked directly at Larry, who hadn't shifted in his seat. "I didn't know," Ricky said, voice low but steady, "about the patch, about what it meant. I thought I was being funny." "You weren't," Mel said sharply. Ricky nodded. "Took the hit. I know that now." Larry still hadn't moved, still hadn't spoken. "I didn't come here to explain myself," Ricky added. "I came to own it." He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled something out. A folded paper. He walked it to the table and laid it down in front of Larry. "A letter. To the local VFW. I asked if I could volunteer. Said I'd do kitchen duty. clean bathrooms. I just want to learn." Larry's eyes finally rose, and they met Ricky's. Not with warmth. Not yet. But not with ice, either. Just the hard, clear look of a man who'd learned to read character in a man's posture before he ever spoke. "You think that fixes what happened?" Benny growled. "No," Ricky answered, "but it's a start." Larry picked up the letter, opened it, scanned it quietly. After a long pause, he set it down. "You ever lost someone you didn't get to say goodbye to?" he asked. Ricky blinked. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "My uncle. He was a Navy medic. Died of cancer last year. Didn't make it to the hospital in time." Larry nodded slowly. "Then you know something of the weight." The diner was silent again. Not tense. Listening. Larry reached into his jacket pocket. Pulled out the old patch, the torn one. "Hold out your hand." Ricky did. Larry placed the pat in it. "That's not for keeps," he said. "You don't wear it. You don't frame it. You just carry it. Until you understand why it matters." Ricky nodded, gripping it tighter than necessary. Behind them, the jukebox played something soft. An old tune that didn't need to be named. It had been background before. Now it sounded like a hymn. Sam finally poured a fresh cup and set it down in front of Larry. She turned to Ricky. "You hungry?" He looked startled. Yeah, I guess." "You'll pay like everyone else, but you'll eat like family." He smiled, sheepish. "That's fair." As she walked back to the counter, Logan entered again, just in time to see Ricky being waved toward a stool. He paused, studied the room, then nodded once, just to himself, and took his usual seat beside the window. Larry didn't speak again for the rest of the meal, but his fingers, resting lightly on the tabletop, occasionally tapped 3 times. A rhythm. An old one. The kind a man drums to steady his own heartbeat when memories come fast and sharp. Outside, the sun moved across the pavement. The quiet had returned. But it wasn't the same quiet anymore. The town changed quietly, almost imperceptibly, after that day. It started with little things. A new flagpole erected outside Hale's diner. Sam didn't make a big deal about it, just said it felt right. A local high school student painted a mural on the side wall, showing folded hands holding a patch just like the one Larry had worn, light pouring through the threads like stained glass. No names, just symbols. It was subtle, powerful, and every veteran who saw it stopped for at least a minute longer than they needed to. Word spread that Ricky Carter had started showing up twice a week at the VFW hall. He peeled potatoes for veteran dinners, swept the floors, helped a retired Marine fix the ramp leading to his back porch. He didn't post about it, didn't make speeches. The older guys kept an eye on him, tested him in their own quiet way, and eventually started calling him Kid, with less bite and more welcome. Larry never mentioned him again, not to the others, not even when they saw each other. But one morning, after a veteran's breakfast, he tapped Ricky on the shoulder as he walked past and said, "Good work today." That was all. Ricky stood there for 10 full seconds before letting the air out of his lungs. The patch stayed with him, folded in the inside pocket of his jacket, a reminder, not a trophy. Back at Hale's diner, the booth by the window took on a new weight. It was no longer just Larry's. It was where anyone could sit who needed to. He still claimed it most mornings, and when he wasn't there, it seemed wrong for someone else to take the seat, unless they understood what it meant. On the last Saturday of the month, Sam hosted a special breakfast, Veteran Appreciation Day. Flyers went up, local businesses donated coffee and supplies, and families filled the booths while veterans shared stories that had mostly lived in silence. Logan showed up in uniform that morning. He didn't say much, just stood near the back, watching everything like a quiet anchor holding the room steady. Larry arrived right at 8. Pressed jeans, polished boots, jacket freshly cleaned but still worn and the patch sewn back onto the sleeve, its torn edges now stitched in red thread, intentionally visible, like scars that weren't meant to be hidden. He didn't expect what happened next. As he stepped inside, the whole diner went still for a second. Then someone clapped. Just one. It might have been Mel or Benny, no one remembered for sure. But it spread. The room filled with applause, not loud or raucous, but steady and full, the kind that makes a man straighten without realizing it. Larry stopped halfway to his booth. His eyes flicked over the crowd, and for once he didn't deflect the attention. He just nodded once, slowly, and took his seat. Sam brought him as usual before he asked. She left the bill face down on the table, as always, but he knew it would say no charge, like it had the last few weeks. Later that morning, just as the crowd began to thin, a silver sedan pulled up in front of the diner. A woman stepped out, her posture stiff but purposeful. She wore a blazer with a pin on the collar. Department of Veterans Affairs? She walked inside with a clipboard in her hand and a question in her eyes. "Excuse me," she said at the counter. "I'm looking for Mr. Larry Adler." He looked up from his coffee. "It depends," he said. "What for?" She smiled politely. "We were contacted about a local veteran who never formally received commendations for actions in service. Several community members submitted statements and documentation." Larry blinked. Slowly. "We reviewed his record. We found confirmation of a rescue operation near Quan Tree in '68. 5 men evacuated under fire. He was listed as the only survivor of the team who made it in and back out. The paperwork never finalized due to the nature of the mission, but the Navy Cross was approved posthumously for the others, and we're here to correct that oversight." Larry set his cup down gently. The room had gone quiet again. "Is this a joke?" he asked, not harsh, just warily. "No, sir," she said, stepping forward. She opened the case. Inside was a velvet-lined box. The Navy Cross sat in it, gleaming faintly under the diner's lights. Larry stared at it, not moving. Sam came out from behind the counter and stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder. He swallowed hard, cleared his throat. "I wasn't expecting that." "You earned it," Logan said, stepping forward now. "Some of us just had to make sure someone said it out loud." Larry didn't take the box. Not at first. He just nodded slowly, the weight of memory pressing into him in a way that no metal could ever balance. Then finally, he reached for it. His hands weren't shaking. "I'll accept it," he said, "but not for me. For the ones who didn't come back." Everyone understood what he meant. By the end of the day, the medal was displayed on a small shelf Sam had cleared behind the counter, next to a photo of a young Larry in uniform. She placed it right above the cash register, so no one could come in without seeing it. The next morning, someone slipped a note into the tip jar. It read, "Thank you for reminding us what respect looks like." Sam folded it and placed it beside the medal. Outside, the sky was clear. No noise, no drama. Just the sound of a community that had remembered something it had almost forgotten. And one man who'd said more with silence than most do with speeches. The quiet at last was complete.